The author of Hunter x Hunter, Yoshihiro Togashi, is one of the authors who can really dive deeper into novel things like human emotions, feelings, friendship, love, and the meaning of life. In typical anime, the author would try to make the story progress as simple as possible to fit into the shonen category. They add just enough depth to the story so that it's deep, dramatic enough, and simple enough to understand. This is the most effective strategy to reach a larger audience, and there's nothing wrong with that approach. After all, anime doesn't need to be profoundly philosophical or complex. However, Togashi likes to go above and beyond by delving deeper into subjects, yet he still manages to present them in the story in a way that is digestible by most of the audience. The character and story developments in Hunter x Hunter are so nuanced that it's done almost on the same level as literary works or movie. Shonen anime is typically not considered at the same level as movies or literature because they're categorically different, but that doesn't mean categories are mutually exclusive. A great story can emerge from a mixture of multiple genres or categories. But in my humble opinion, animes like Hunter x Hunter gets really close to that level. One of the many things that made Hunter x Hunter great is its incredible depiction of friendship. We were shown different aspects of friendship through the challenges Gon and Killua went through, the happy moments they shared, the sacrifices they made. Togashi always maintains the right dose of complexity and simplicity. Just think about how well designed and thought out the Nen ability is. It's considered one of the greatest power systems of all time for a reason. It's very consistent in its rules and logic. I've rarely seen Hunter x Hunter fans complain about power levels or balance. Okay, back to the depiction of friendship. The reason Gon and Killua's friendship is so compelling is the strong contrast between their characters, and they are the polar opposites. The only thing they have in common is perhaps that they both possess immense natural talent and are both Nen prodigies. But how they grew up and their psychological compositions are vastly different. Killua was born into a wealthy family of assassins. His parents controlled and architected all aspects of his life from birth. This is what Bisky called overbearing toxic love, and I'll revisit Bisky's role in Killua's development later in this video. And Killua had no room to explore the world on his own terms. Everything was forced and taught by his parents, so he had no friends. For once he tried to befriend Canary, who was a butler trainee, but his mother caught the spark and put out the fire immediately before it got bigger. Killua was trained and shaped to be an assassin. His parents only wanted him to be an assassin, nothing more, nothing less. He underwent all sorts of painful, extreme, special training and conditioning. Since all these pressures started so early in his life, this conditioning has been deeply ingrained in his brain. The things you've experienced and learned in your childhood stay with you forever, because that is the period when your brain is clearest and most adept at absorbing information. Also, Killua was a special case because he was a prodigy. That's why his parents were so desperate. He was seen as a prospect of a great successor and a great asset to the family business. They even went so far as to have his brother Illumi place a needle in his head to always keep him under control. And if he ever tried to resist the control, he would manipulate him back into his default state. It's like placing a parental control on your child's phone, but on his brain. And everything he does has to be aligned with what his parents want. Nothing is more cruel than becoming a prisoner inside your own mind. And the worst part is that Killua himself wasn't even aware of this control until Chimera Ant arc. For typical children, the training he had undergone would have been a severe trauma, but he has his family genes, which probably allowed him to endure, but still I think he experienced some trauma, but he simply didn't have a time to process the trauma. Okay, to explain Killua's ordeal, and what I mean by that, first I need to dive deeper into his friendship with Gon. Gon was a gateway for Killua on his way towards self-realization and finding meaning in his life. And now I'll go over the entire lifetime of Gon and Killua's friendship, and I'll fill in my comments as I go. Even though he was brainwashed and a Nen needle was controlling him in his head all the time, Killua's willpower was strong enough for him to leave his home and pursue his own path. He even had a fight with his mother before he left. The idea of becoming an assassin just never clicked, and everything was forced on him, and it felt suffocating. He knew he had to become someone else. His first destination was the Hunter exam. He only wanted to challenge himself with no other goals in mind and no idea that this would change the course of the rest of his life. Then he met Gon, the only other participant his age. Children make friends easily, especially if they have common interests. Same goes for Gon and Killua. Also, they both never had any friends before, so you could say they both needed this connection. Just someone with whom you can share stuff you like and stuff you want to do. Gon's first time seeing a skateboard and Killua asking him if he wants to try, it was for me one of the most memorable scenes from this arc. Hunter exam was just a gentle breeze for them at the beginning. It was more of a period when they started hanging out, get to know each other more, and have fun until the last stage of the exam, where we were shown how their friendship grew in this short period of time. Killua's brother Illumi was also a participant. He didn't notice because Illumi had a disguise until the final stage. The final stage of Hunter exam was one-on-one fight where there will be only one disqualifier, and each participant needed to win once to pass the stage. The loser will keep fighting the next opponent. His brother Illumi wasn't there to punish Killua. In fact, he had his own business. It was just a bad luck that Killua encountered his brother. After seeing Killua develop a friendship with someone, Illumi brainwashed him back to his default state of mind as an assassin. As we know, he was using Nen back then. That's why he had such strong control over Killua, who wasn't a Nen user at the time. Thus, he could not resist. Illumi blackmailed Killua by saying he would kill Gon if he didn't forfeit their match. And of course Killua did forfeit, but the messed up part was that Illumi also made Killua think that he wasn't worthy of being someone's friend, and he was only meant to be an assassin. And at the end of the day, all he has is murderous intent against everyone he meets. This hit the mark because he did work as an assassin before. So it's easy for Killua to think that maybe he's right. He's just an assassin and he's incapable of forming a bond with anyone. After being manipulated like this, a lot of negative emotions overlapped and converged in his mind. Disappointment, fear, anger. And to blow off his steam, he kills one of the participants who was gonna fight Leorio. And I also think he wanted to make sure that Leorio passes the exam. This was a very important moment for Killua, his first step towards overcoming his ordeal. For the first time, he stepped out of his comfort zone, sacrificed himself for other person, and tried to face the control he was in. We all know that change is hard, especially when you must resist the conditioning and training you've received your entire life, and not to mention you're being controlled by a nen. In his mind, he thought he was a failure, and he was unworthy of becoming friend of Gon. But as a matter of fact, he was more than worthy. By forfeiting his fight, not only did he save Gon, but he also helped Leorio. Unfortunately, Gon was unconscious the entire time while this was happening. When he woke up, one of the examiners told him what happened. And then he immediately confronts Illumi, who said Killua went back home on his own will. But of course, Gon saw through this and he knew that Illumi did something to Killua. Then Gon, along with Kurapika and Leorio, went to Killua's home to take him back. By coming after Killua, Gon shows how much Killua means to him. Also, Gon proved his loyalty to all people who actually care about Killua. Goto and Canary, the butlers, who actually cared for Killua. The way Gon took beating from Canary and his resilience he showed to Goto's test, all of this amounted to reassurance that Killua is in good hands. He has got good friends. And once again, Killua restores his hope for friendship. Their bond became stronger as the episodes went on. The Heaven's Arena arc was relatively peaceful and happy period. They weren't faced with any dire situations except for Gon's match against Hisoka. Although Hisoka had no intention of ending Gon, it was still scary. In this arc, we got to see Killua's friendly care towards Gon from his actions like making sure Gon and Hisoka's match happens and helping Gon to improve his nen and keeping those rookie hunters don't get better of Gon and so on. But they were never in any danger in this arc, so Killua was yet to face his brainwashing again. During the York New arc, Killua had to face his brainwashing multiple times. The more his feeling that Gon is an important person grows, the more his brainwashing kick in to push him back. And we started to see his conflict with himself more and more. For instance, when they were caught by the Phantom Troop and was brought into their hideout, when Phaeton subdued Gon, Killua was about to make a move to help, but then immediately got stopped by Hisoka, who was also a member of the gang at the time. From his combat experience, he knew that with 1 inch of movement, Hisoka would end him right there. This event triggered his ordeal. He felt an intense conflict. If Phaeton did try to end Gon or fatally harm him, would he still try to save him by risking his own life? He couldn't answer it back then. He couldn't say, yes, I would. And that was the reality. He was trained to fight only when he had a guaranteed win. So sacrificing and risking his life in a fight for someone else just goes everything that he was taught, every principle that he was trained into. With all these having funs and all these great feelings that he's getting from his friendship with Gon felt like nothing. When push comes to shove, he hesitated, not because he wanted to, but because his brainwashing made him to. And that made it worse. And this conflict continued on when they were being held captive by Nobunaga right after this event, who had intention to let him join Phantom Troop, and he was gonna show Gon and Killua to Chrollo and ask if they can join. During this event, Killua went down the rabbit hole of thought, would I really save Gon if they were to hurt him? Then Illumi's voice starts to say, he can't, you can't. The manipulation got worse the more he had doubts. This vicious manipulation was designed to feed off of Killua's negative thoughts, especially doubts. The problem is also he's inherently anxious and overanalyzing person. Illumi's manipulation was winning the whole time, but Gon's positivity made him forget about his doubts, and he swept it under the rug until Chimera Ant arc came. This was gonna happen sooner or later. He'll have to face his brainwashing and free himself. And his encounter with one of the Royal Guard, Pito, during the Chimera Ant arc was the stairway to his liberation. Gon and Killua followed Kite on his mission to hunt down the dangerous mutant insects called Chimera Ants. Kite knew the weight of this mission, but he miscalculated. He didn't expect to face ants that are stronger than Netero or even Jing. Also, Gon and Killua's confidence gave him assurance they were more than capable of handling the soldier ants. This video is focused only on Killua, but I want to mention that this encounter with Pito was also a heavy hit for Gon as well. Both Gon and Killua faced their weaknesses, and they both had a major trigger for character development. What Gon had to face was that he wasn't strong enough to protect those close to him, and how far he is right now from becoming a real hunter. The thing about Gon is that he tries to enforce his positivity to the real world, and he always have this hope that things will work out in the end, but sometimes it doesn't, and he wasn't ready for that. But this time, his positivity indeed didn't manifest in reality. They had to leave Kite to his death. But Gon was able to recover with his positive thinking, and also he had a hope that Kite was still alive, and that was the only pillar that was holding his sanity. And once he knew that Kite was actually dead already, the rest is history. As for Killua, as I mentioned, this event was Killua's entryway to facing his mental prison once and for all. His ordeal was to overcome his brainwashing and unlearn everything he was taught, how he thinks, and he needed to attain the resolve to sacrifice himself for Gon when the moment comes. And now here comes the breakdown of one of the most significant scenes. Bisky's one-on-one lesson for Killua. Bisky has years of teaching experience. She knows how to train people, both physically and mentally. She had developed an attachment to Killua and Gon from the time they spent together on Greed Island. Hence, she valued their friendship and she wanted it to never end. In a way, she was like a mother figure to them. And that's why she had to show Killua the ordeal he had to overcome if he wants to remain friends with Gon. Otherwise, their friendship was waiting for a tragic ending. From the way that Killua fights, behaves, and thinks, she formed a clear idea of the history of how Killua was raised, trained, and groomed by his family. And his brainwashing was strong. She foresaw that one day, if he continued to brush these problems off and just keep saying it's fine, I'll face it later, then he would let Gon die one day. And painfully so, this was true. So as a part of this training, she fights with Killua without holding her power back, with her true form, which probably, I think, gave him a PTSD. She starts with showing how his pessimistic thought process works when facing an enemy. Whenever he fights someone he deemed as stronger than him, he always assumes the worst possible scenario by thinking he's stronger than me, so he must have an ace that he's hiding, so I probably won't win this fight. And he's too cautious, always try to aim for 100% certain win. Bisky points out that this is not his fault, but the people who taught him how to fight are to blame. Then she bluntly says that one day he'll let Gon die, and that line was brutal because it was true. Even when he's fighting an opponent with an equal power level, he still overanalyzes and thinks about the worst scenario, and he has tendency to always underestimate himself and overestimate his enemy. Then he completely drops all his thoughts of winning and starts to think about how to escape. Lastly, Bisky directly says that if he can't win his fight against Shoot, he should leave Gon. And just to refresh your memory, Gon and Killua wasn't gonna be the part of the battle against the Chimera Ants unless they win against Moral Students, Shoot, and Knuckle. Okay, back to Bisky's line. All these things she's saying to Killua are mean and harsh to some people, but actually she had good intentions. The point is that Killua is at this point where you can't change him by going easy. It's now or never. They have a big fight ahead, a life or death situation. And later, both Gon and Killua lose their respective fights. It was even worse for Killua, who was already fighting his inner battle and had to fight while being aware of all his weaknesses. It's like when you're having a bad headache and your doctor advises you to pay attention to your pain, says it's the only way to make it better. His doubts and underestimation of his power doubled, resulting in his loss. Finally, he makes up his mind that he couldn't overcome his ordeal, so he decides to leave Gon forever once he regains his Nen, because Gon had his Nen neutralized for a month due to Knuckles' ability. Now, his last task was to protect him from roaming Chimera Ants. Aside from everything going on, Palm and Gon decides to go to date, and Killua had to monitor and follow wherever they went. And once they got into a forest, speak of the devil, Killua encounters good old Ramit, who had grudges against him from the previous fight. And he was the best candidate to do the job for pushing Killua. If it was one of the good ants, we would have seen the end of Hunter x Hunter right there. Because Killua wouldn't have been able to break free if it was an enemy that wouldn't push him that far. It's because it was a heartless and psychotic scumbag like Ramit. Killua got the proper urgency and feeling of danger he needed. And this was the moment. If he couldn't stop Ramit right here and now, Gon will die. And more Killua tried to overcome Illumi's voice, the louder it got. But finally, his strong willpower was amplified by his feelings for his closest friend that he ever had. He was able to break free. And he discovers his brother Illumi had put a needle in his head. With sigh of relief, followed by laughter of liberation, enter the real Killua. Unburdened by doubts or no overanalyzing and no voices, the real Killua. He proceeds to unalive the ant in an instant. This scene also showed us how strong Killua actually was at this time, without any mental blocker. And there, he finally overcame his ordeal. And for the remainder of the Chimera Ant arc, I won't say Killua's battles were easy and victorious, given that no one was actually stronger than the royal guards except maybe Aluka, but he fought all his battles with full might, with no fear. And more importantly, his smartness doubled now that he's only focused on finding ways to win, as opposed to his past self who would only look for ways to escape when encountered with stronger enemy. He was ready to die with Gon if things go sideways, which was the most likely outcome, and he knew it. And his fight against Yuppie was a thing of beauty. The old Killua wouldn't risk fighting Yuppie, even if he had a temporary advantage, because the power level gap is too big. But he gives a good beating to Yuppie. Although it didn't do any damage, it was more of a blowing off of steam and also experimenting of his new ability. Okay, now that Killua overcame his ordeal, how will he help his friend to overcome his ordeal? Killua couldn't do anything for Gon other than making sure their fight with Pitou go without any interference. At that point, Gon had his 1 foot dipped in hot lava of mental breakdown. One slip, he would have dived in and burned himself. And Killua knew. He could tell how Kite's tragedy was eating away Gon. He was full of regrets. He never had any experience like this before. Killua was afraid to face the future. He knew that Gon's ordeal would conclude in one way or another, and the most likely outcome will be tragic. He actually made up his mind for this worst outcome. But the involvement of the third party in this battle against ants, as Killua called it, he had hunched that after seeing all the strange events happening at Meruem's place, Pitou removing her end circle for a few hours and so on, he knew that something was off. Then he concluded that a third party was involved in this battle, which had the potential to change the course of this battle. And Komugi did change the outcome of the battle. With her existence, Gon and Killua had leverage against Pitou, who was ordered by Meruem to protect and heal her injuries, so she couldn't move or leave Komugi wide open. That's why Killua had glimmer of hope that they might make it out of this, and even heal Kite, he thought. And now I want to go over one of the most important scenes in this arc. With everything going on during this battle against the Chimera Ants and all that, we got to see how much Killua was suffering, aside from his personal ordeal. In episode 124, when Killua was fighting against Palm, who became Poof's experiment and turned into a Chimera Ant, initially he was just trying to pull Palm's emotional strings by talking about Gon and what he's going through, in an effort to wake her up from Poof's control, but then it turned into him blowing off his steam and letting out everything he had been collecting in his chest until now. It just poured down like a rain, and as the flood came, his mental dam broke and everything was soaked. Ever since Kite's incident, he couldn't do anything but to just exist beside Gon. And every time he saw Gon's face slowly turning blank, he was hurting. And this is, to me, one of the most significant scenes in this arc. But since this arc had so many impactful scenes, this arc was just beautiful. People often forget about this scene. In the end, Gon ended up handling Pitou on his own, with the cost of almost ending his life and losing his nen. And when Killua came at the last moment, as Gon was dealing blow to Pitou's already lifeless body. And that's the moment Killua saw how much Kite's incident broke Gon. Okay, in the previous section, I unpacked how Killua overcame his ordeal, but now in this section, I'll go over its aftermath and after effects. By overcoming his ordeal, Killua is now free from the mental prison he was in. But this freedom was a double-edged sword. Killua is naturally a very caring person, but it was being suppressed by Illumi's brainwashing. But now that the block is gone, he started to see the cruelty of his family's lifestyle. He came back home to ask for a favor from his little sister, Aluka, to ask her to heal Gon. but when he came back, he saw the situation with open eyes, that they were holding one of his family member like a prisoner. Aluka never left the room that she was locked in, even though she had all her needs provided except freedom. She had special power. Another entity resides in her body, which is almost omnipotent. An entity that supposedly came from the Dark Continent. It can grant any wish you ask, but the greater the wish, the greater the cost. But the cost is paid by whoever will ask for the next wish. Killua was the only sibling that she grew up close. So Killua knew how her ability worked in and out. His initial plan was to only ask her to heal Gon, but after seeing her sister like this, he couldn't let her live like this anymore. So he decides to break her out and take her with him. And in this arc, we got to see a little bit of Zoldyck family politics. Each family member has their own self-interest, yet it somehow benefits the family. But I'm not gonna dig deep into the details of Zoldyck family in this video. Killua is free, but still he hasn't spent enough time with this new perception. He'll need time and experience to learn to see the world through this new perspective. Now I need to go over 2 scenes to elaborate more on this. First, if you recall Tsubone's inner dialogue, that'll pretty much sum up what I'm trying to convey. To jog your memory, she was one of the senior and most trusted butlers of the Zoldyck family. And not to mention, she's incredibly strong and scary as hell. She was ordered to attend Killua and Aluka while Gon was being healed. When Aluka was about to heal Gon, after looking at Killua's sad and empty eyes, Tsubone said, "The boy suffered less when he was being controlled." How ironic and cruel. Yes, it was good that Killua overcame his ordeal and broke free from his control, but as a result, now he has more conscience and empathy. But the world is cruel, so he'll suffer more now. This may be the next stage of his ordeal. Now, on to the next scene. Killua's heart-to-heart conversation with Nanika, the entity that lives inside sister's body. And this conversation happened after Nanika healed Gon. Killua thought that the best decision for everyone was to ask Nanika to never come out again, because he thought her power will only attract misery and destruction. But then Aluka scolds him with the face of an angry little sister, says if he wants to be with her, also accept Nanika. Then everything clicked, and Killua saw how selfishly he was thinking. Basically, his thought was that Nanika has fulfilled its use, and now I don't need it, and I only need her good side. This is how the old Killua used to think when he was under Illumi's control. A cold, logical thinker who only thinks what's most beneficial to him. But now he's different. He has learned to care and to sacrifice himself for others. He also sees the nature of Nanika for the first time. Nanika is dangerous and unpredictable, but he noticed, hey, Nanika is just like my sister. It's a child, it's innocent, and it's not evil. It'll only become what you want to become. If you want Nanika to nuke an entire nation and use it for destruction, it will be evil. But if you care and love Nanika and lead her to help others, it will. It's just a child, he thought. And this is the realization he came to, and he finally embraced Nanika as part of her sister. And enter one of the heaviest tearjerker scenes. This is almost on par with Komugi and Miriam's scene, to me. This scene is also symbolically important. Aluka is the good side and Nanika is the dark side of her. If you want to be with someone, whether they are your family member, loved one, or whoever, you have to accept both sides of that person. Otherwise, it's selfish. It's like one of those friends who only calls you whenever they drink or party, but when you're feeling low and you call them, all of a sudden they don't know where the green button is. And that's all I wanted to cover for this video. Killua's character development is one of the most elegantly written character development because of how accurately it represents the impact of family influence on children and how hard it is to break free from those influence. When Killua left his home, he wanted to find his own meaning in life, not something his family set for him. And to find that meaning, first he had to break free from his family brainwashing. And just want to point out that Illumi's needle is of course symbolic of everything that Killua's family has instilled and forced on him. And I think the meaning he found was to care and love others at the end. And he learned that through his friendship with Gon. And that's why at the end of the Hunter x Hunter anime, when Gon and Killua parted ways, he said he'll travel and protect Aluka for the rest of his life. Because that's the meaning he found, and it's really poetic story if you think about it. Killua is an assassin who learned to love. Thank you for watching and stay tuned. Consider subscribing if you'd like more videos like these. Cheers.